I do have to say that these stars, I think, might be my breaking point. What are these? Hello honeys, this video is a little different. We're going to take a casual look at Aikatsu Stars' star premium dresses, a topic suggested by Rosie Sievers. I'm a little short on time this week, so I won't be able to get into the Aikatsu Friends cohorts, but I'm excited to get our first taste of Aikatsu Stars on the channel. Blooming Queen, Elsa is one of my favorite characters in the entire series. I think she's so interesting as a character. Where should we start? Let's start, I guess, by going piece by piece, because we have, first of all, her bodice. I did record this once and it corrupted, so I'm doing it again. I'll say everything I said before. I really like the structure. I think it works. I do wish that these roses were more of like an embroidery texture, because you can see they have like kind of like a flat lighting on them. There is shading on the illustration, but there's not like a shadow underneath to show that they're 3D elements. It's just very 2D and very flat. Whereas you can look at like some of these gold details and they have a little bit more shading on them to show them as 3D elements. Like looks very subtle shadow under them to show that they're three-dimensional. So that's what I'd change for those. Otherwise, like they have this rose design on the underside of the ruffle. That's a great way to add interest, you know, for the skirt. Texture is looking really nice. They have this nice like velvet texture, so it's not just a flat red fabric. It's more tapestry-like. They have these nice scrolling organic vines and vines and flowers and everything. It's really nice. Obviously, the more three-dimensional jewels and embroidery here is nice too. And then for the skirt, let's see. They have a better shot of this elsewhere, like here, with this really dramatic L shape with like all these chains, making it clear that like the weight of this skirt panel is really heavy, like it's a heavy material. It's so interesting. I don't know if they needed it to be like as sharp of a curve as that, but just the fact that they chose to include it is so unique, because otherwise the shape of the dress is like this mini dress, right? And then you have like kind of an Aikatsu standard like high-low skirt design where it's longer in the back, but this L shape is so different and it's off-center, so it's asymmetrical too. It just adds such an interesting element to this dress that makes it stand out a lot. And then for the shoes are just cute. Nice leather texture. You have this like almost flared Elizabethan collar, which is very, very interesting. And yeah, the gold flowers fit in really well. And you have leg jewelry, which is also fitting nicely. And I like this black leg cuff here. The wings are super Rococo inspired. A lot of Aikatsu Stars designs are very Rococo inspired, which is a nice, at least, consistency between them. Sometimes it gets a little boring. I think we'll see some other times where I think they go overboard with the detail. But like for things like this, I think they keep it to a good level of complexity where there's still like recognizable structure and then like also little glimpses of more detail that you can look more deeply into and still recognize what everything is. Details where it should be. Oh, I did want to say that on the back of the skirt, yeah, they make sure to continue all the detail, so it's more of a three-dimensional design, which is nice. Even if it's just more like this tapestry scrolling, I think that's still valuable and still adds the amount of detail it needs. Yep, and they make sure that this is a interesting shape too from the side, so it's like a little bit longer in the front and then it cuts up and then longer again at the back. It's a good way to make sure you have still a lot of visual flow, because that's like a directional line that you follow. And it takes you down to the point and around, and then you can travel up the front of these items, and this chain is there for that too. The chain connects it to the hand, so your eye is following up to her face. That's how that works. That's also what the wings are for too, because by extending out this way, you get more like bigger silhouette on her, and usually animators will use those directionally, so like this line leads to her face with the gold here and the roses. But yeah, I think it's the perfect balance of detail. No real complaints here. Perfect queen. I agree. Lovely. Daylight Festival. This image is very deceptive because from just this, like the color scheme and the silhouette and everything, I think it's working really well. I'm not as big a fan of their use of Carnival as a theme, personally. This image, I think, is fine. But if you look at how it's treated in the CG for the anime, I think all the beadwork on the legs gets a little bit too much. There are some nice details. The other thing I wanted to mention is that they have this kind of like uniform, sparkly texture over a lot of the different fabrics. But if you look at this like satiny fabric, I think you really lose something when you have all of the pieces be the same sparkly material, because like I can see why they'd want like some extra sparkle on these just plain satin pieces. That gives them a little bit more depth, but I don't think you need the sparkles on these striped pieces. If you take out the sparkles from these striped pieces, then that would be more like a flat matte piece, and then you'd have the shiny metallic pieces, and then you'd have the shimmery satin pieces, and that would create more variation between them, which would help you differentiate between them a lot better and show off the shapes a lot better too. So that'd be my main critique. Because they definitely need the shimmery texture overlay, because look at the blue. It just kind of looks plain. Yeah, there's some interesting things going on here. I think it's a fine design, but the leg jewelry here is just way too much. It's too many lines. You have very solid pieces in the top and the skirt. But I think the leg jewelry is too much. They really don't need both the thigh cuff and this knee cuff, and then they don't need these like draping jewelry pieces from the thigh cuff either. I don't think it's really serving much purpose there. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Daylight Festival. In comparison, the arm jewelry is working really well because it's more minimal. They just have these really simple beaded chains and these really simple arm cuffs, so they don't distract you very much. They keep the same like texture repetition from the arm cuffs. Beautiful wings also. I love the sunset gradient. The jewels are really nice. The scrolling of the gold filament is really nice too. Those are fine. Floral Fantasia is very cute. I think Aikatsu Stars has a tendency to go heavier into detail with a lot of its cords. You can see that in just like how many layers we have in the skirt and all the detailed flower embellishments here at the bottom. I think it has its pros and its cons. I think sometimes it works really well like here, but we'll see other times where I don't think it works as well. Yeah, I don't have too much to say about Floral Fantasia besides the fact that it has an effective use of detail. The jewelry pieces are well considered. They leave room for more iconic shapes to be made with like the flower petals of the purple here, which pull into the purple of the bodice, and that helps your eye kind of contain all of this as a recognizable shape and remember like what it is in your brain. Whereas once you get down to like these greens, you're like, okay, those are like leaves, but then your eye does kind of get lost in like the minute details, which is fine in this case because they tie in more organics in these flowers and the leaves and vines. So that kind of makes sense how you fall into more of like a disorganized, natural, organic shape here. So that works. Wings are nice. I like classic fairy wings. These are very like Barbie Fairytopia. They have good gradients. I like the transparency that they bring in. The thick outline works because it just emphasizes all of the shapes and helps also to make it a little bit more graphic in shape. And I'm pretty sure these are the same flowers that they're using on the skirt too. So that's good. It's all very cohesive. It's an analogous palette with the purple, blue, green, which is very pleasing. Yeah, not too much contrast here. The gold jewelry is very minimal. It's very effective. It ties into the gold embellishment on the bodice. I think I definitely call this like an upgraded version of Sakura's blooming dress. It has the same theme, similar colors, similar vibe, but it just has a lot more detail. Looks a lot more polished. I'm not a huge fan of this habit of just leaving a plain like tube top almost and then like sticking embellishments on it, but at least they have like this trim, the gold trim on it, so it looks a little more structured. That's really all I have to say about Floral Fantasia. Ray is also one of my favorite characters for a totally different reason than Elsa. I don't actually like the two of them together almost at all, but I think she's a really interesting character and I love her story arc and everything. Well, I don't, not everything about her story arc, but I do generally love her very much. This outfit, though, is also very interesting. I've said before, I love the prince theme in Aikatsu. I think it's nice when they get to do more masculine styles, since everything is very feminine. Yeah, obviously the main focal point here is the wings, so let's look at those first. These are so heavily detailed, and it's really good that the rest of the outfit is a lot more understated to make up for them, because otherwise these would just overwhelm anything that was trying to come through in the rest of the design. The crystal shapes are really great. They look like swords, so that's a really good use of the theme of the brand, which is Royal Sword. Yeah, there's such a heavy Rococo influence in Aikatsu Stars too, which doesn't carry over into the other series as much, I think. I'm just tracing all these shapes because they're really nice. Very strong graphic shapes. Okay, and then for the actual clothing pieces, yeah, I think this is a really nice top. They have a nice like tunic underneath, which the crystal motif is still working there. It's very subtle underneath, which is good. These colors are great. These are actually some of my favorite colors that I see in costume design. I like white and light blue and gold a lot. The asymmetrical like mini cape here is really good. Very interesting. More asymmetry with this like half skirt section, and then you see that the tunic gets completed with this dark blue section, which ties into the sash from the top. Lots of really ornate scrolling details here. And then the boots, they continue that crystal texture with the gradient, which is good for cohesiveness. The gold toe of the boot is nice and interesting. They keep more military styles in these wing shapes in the fringe. And of course the sword. Very cool sword. Somewhat basic design, but it doesn't need to be that flashy. The handle is ornate enough. Yeah, I like how this crystal texture is used to emphasize the shape of the leg. And then you see these sleeve patterns. They also help to point in the direction that the arms are facing, which is good for choreography. It's good dance costuming. The sheath for the sword has a nice design on it. It really also helps with direction. Yeah, altogether, it's a much sleeker silhouette than obviously a lot of Aikatsu, but they still have a lot of trailing pieces like the mini cape and this skirt panel that help to add a more dynamic element and more movement. See, it even fills out the silhouette, even in illustration form. Yeah, I do really like this one. It's on the simpler side, but it has a ton of really nice detail that kind of makes up for that. And I think it's a very pretty color scheme and pretty details overall. Oh, I forgot to mention how shimmery these pants are too, besides the crystal texture. Where's a good shot of them? I didn't notice that the entire pant leg is also like sequined. That's so funny. Still, the gradient does work though. For rainbow etoile, I can usually go either way on the high-low dresses and these this super emphasized ball gown shape, but I think here it is working really well. This like V shape is really nice. One thing I don't like as much about Aikatsu Stars design is the tendency to use these really ambiguous like gradient textures. I think it works in some contexts, like with Innocent Prince, it was really emphasized in the wings that it was like a crystal material. But here, when you don't really have as much context for what this material is and like why it's so big and what is forming these like geometric shapes, I think it breaks some of the realism, like quote unquote realism, that I kind of appreciate about a lot of Aikatsu designs. But I think we see more of that later. I think we start to get into more dramatic territory with Yume, and Yume, a lot of Yume's cords, and we'll talk about that later with the Eternal dresses as well. For the most part, this is very cute. It took me a while to say it, but I do like this design. It's really interesting how they have like bandaged wings as part of her wing design, which obviously fits with her storyline, which I won't spoil if you haven't seen or haven't finished it, but it does talk a lot about healing. You get a lot of visual noise with all this beadwork in some shots. There's just so much tiny repetitive detail, like down the skirt and everything, that it starts to become a little jumbled. And when you also have like these really textured gradients, it can also create a lot of visual noise, which is also you have sparkles in the sleeves and the bodice and everything. You're missing kind of like matte sections to ground it. Like you kind of have that in the fluffy, like this, what is this supposed to be, like wings on the bodice here. And then you also have the shininess of the metal as well. Yeah, a lot of these like vague gradients where you're not really sure what the material is supposed to be. Shape is really cute, obviously. Silhouette is very nice. And I do love the boots. I forgot to mention it when I passed over it before, but I love the boots. I think these teardrop shapes coming off of the skirt are really inventive. And then obviously it's rainbow, so the rainbow gradient makes complete sense. The wing motif is one of my favorites. I like stars. I like hearts. It's very, very sweet. There's just a lot of detail here that I think starts to border on distracting for me because you're focusing less on the actual shape of the pieces and any actual like recognizable visual hierarchy, and it's just you become distracted by all the detail and you're not sure what to look at really. Like these do form really strong directional lines up to the bodice, but once you get to the bodice, it kind of like loses you in all this. Yeah, look, so you go up these lines and you hit this trim here and then it kind of funnels you up and around, so at least not like from far away it's working that way. Yeah, this would be like borderline too much for me, which like even Star Festival from like the original series is much more it's much worse than this, so it's fine. Just my personal taste coming in. Rock My Heart's really cute. I think it makes some interesting shapes with its pieces, and I like the bat wings I did talk about some of these cords yesterday when I tried to record and just didn't get through everything, but yeah, I think for the most part this is a really solid design. Let's go piece by piece because we have for the top, they use a lot of this like leather texture, which I think is great. It's really unique. Even though it doesn't seem like that comfortable to me personally, it makes a really interesting texture variation with like the sparkles and the chains and the lacing and everything. So you get this really nice balance of like these heavy pieces, these heavy sections, and then you'll have like lighter sections like in the skirt where it's more free-flowing ruffles and fabric. I think the corset shape is interesting. It's not like a full all the way across. It has like a wider lacing here, and this little band of studs at the bottom is nice too, which matches obviously like the asymmetrical stud bracelets here. And then this glove is nice. That's really interesting how it's different on either side. We talk about that a lot. And then here you see that they have like silver chains on the skirt with a little bit of gold chains. Is that? I guess that's fine. I wonder if I would have liked it better if it was all gold chains. People have different opinions on mixing gold and silver. Because, like, where else do those silver chains appear? I guess they are in the wings. I don't know. I don't know if they needed the silver chains. I think they could have made them all gold and it would have been fine. I guess the silver pulls from the silver studs. Okay, maybe. But yeah, what I was talking about with the skirt earlier, what I was going to get to, was that they have these really interesting, like, garter belt style, like, pieces. Like, obviously they're not functionally garter belts, but that's what like the shape is kind of referencing, which is really interesting. Yeah, these charms are really cool. This like netted mesh texture that they have over this skirt fabric panel is interesting too. And the plaid is just subtle enough. A lot of the time we see really bright plaids, but they're letting the stripes from the bodice be kind of like the main contrast texture. And they're letting the plaid just kind of sink into the background more, which is perfect. Perfect. Ooh. And the shoes on these are really interesting because they're actually asymmetrical shoes. That one is taller than the other. So you have one knee-length boot and one that's more calf-length. Here you can see it more clearly. So like that's super interesting. You don't notice it that much because they're kind of similarly designed. They don't call attention to it that much. Like the design of the shoes, they have the same draping and the same like wrap studs on them. But they just have very subtle like height difference to the fishnet. It gives it just a little bit more of an edge. The wings, I'd say my only critique is I don't think it's effective to have like all of this like strong shape going on here and like it's very strong like directional shape, how it's all pointing to this point here. So you have all of these like points that are angled at this point, but this point is not on like the same direction. Like you'd want it to follow the lines from the points of the wings and like be slanted. And then you'd want the bows to kind of slant in that direction too to emphasize it. But I wonder if that just didn't work when they tried to drape the chains from these bows. I wonder if having these be pointed but these still hang down vertically, I wonder if that just didn't look right. Yeah, see the back is almost what I would have preferred, how these are more angled elements. I mean, they're still angled, they're not in line. I don't know why they did that. It feels like a waste of the whole shape of the wing that's very dramatic to not point everything along these lines. Otherwise, I do really like this one. I think it's really cute. This one I remember having an issue with the texture they used for the main fabric, which is this blue. We'll talk about the bodice in a second, but if we just look at the skirt, I think it could have used more of like a velvet look instead of the smoothness, because look. Let's go back to Blooming Queen. And we can see, even though it's really low res, that they have this like velvety texture on it that makes it a lot less flat. It gives it a lot more interest. But if we go back to, oops, spoilers. If we go back to Rosetta Thorn, it's just a very smooth matte fabric, which comes off as a little boring because then you just get these like flat shapes printed on it almost. And like some people really like just a matte printed design. But I would have liked some more texture variation, especially if this is supposed to be like a more dramatic design. And you also have just like a really smooth shape for the skirt as well. The pieces have interesting shapes. I like the cutout shapes of the sleeves. It's nice to get just a little bit of detail on the sleeve too. There's not much. This panel is working well. It's very directional. And that's emphasized with the cut of this overlay piece here at the collar. It's cohesive. It's a little boring. I will say that. The roses are fine. I don't think every Aikatsu floral design needs roses personally, but they do add a lot of texture and complexity because of their shape. So I kind of understand why they use them so much. And so you can just barely see the bottom of this cage skirt. We'll talk about that more in a second. There's more of the cage skirt. Yeah, shoes are nice. I think, again, maybe a little too many roses, but the flared shape is nice. The print on the stockings, maybe a little repetitive, but you don't see that very much from the actual shots they get of this design, so it doesn't really matter that much. Wings are good. Yeah, it's just a little bit on the simpler side. The main focal point is definitely the exposed cage skirt with like the thorny vines wrapped around the structural pieces and the roses. And it's supposed to kind of look like curtains that are pulled up to reveal the structure underneath. But yeah, I think this one is just a little bit too simple for me. Ironically, I think this is simpler in concept. It's simpler in concept definitely than Innocent Prince was. Because even though you have like these giant wings, this is honestly just a big shape slapped over a normal wing. It's not that detailed and like this big lace panel, but like it's clearly just supposed to be like this little patch of pattern and texture behind her head. The shape of them is nice, at least, like how they're kind of turned down more, so you get a much more subdued vibe from them, not as aggressive. Other than that, I don't really think there's much to talk about here besides just like the novelty of the exposed skirt structure. Yeah, it is very pretty. It's very pretty, just doesn't really catch my interest that much. Sweet Dreams. Adorable, first of all. Yume Kawaii aesthetic, very popular, very identifiable, super, super cute. Pinks, purples, blues, the dreamy theme, wonderful. These wings are adorable. It's so perfect. The only thing I think I'm disappointed about for Flow Flow Dream is that I understand that it's like a simpler style and a more graphic style, but I don't think that has to mean that we have to abandon certain details halfway through. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So obviously a flatter, more matte aesthetic is perfectly fine. You have these chunky accessories and are very matte and very simple in style. So I understand why they want the rest of the design to kind of match that simplicity, but it gives it a much more like playful look when it's less ornate, which is perfectly fine. The only thing I don't really understand is why they dropped these little candy dots. Why didn't they include them on the rest of the fluffy pieces? Obviously, I love like fluffy pieces, but they just kind of stopped including them. And I think they would have made really good detail in a really simple design. Like, look, you can see these little candy dot pieces on the waist. They could have just continued that down into the rest of the fur trim, but they even have it on the leg. So why not include it in the middle here? Yeah, even in the illustration, it kind of looks like something's missing. There's just like a little bit of room here for just a little bit of extra detail. Yeah, I don't have much more to say on this one because it is very simple and straightforward. Yeah, very nice. Whoa, I guess it's hard to choose where to start with this because there's so much going on. It's very complex. I guess I'll start with the wings because the wings are really cool. They really grab my attention. How they look like water splashing and a surfboard, like waves. These are so cool. Very abstract, very conceptual. So interesting. And they keep that like rococo shape and like scrolling that the other designs had for all the other wings, but it turns it into something so organic and playful and conceptual again. That's nice to see. I like how they take advantage of like the kind of fantasy vibe that a lot of the Aikatsu Stars cords have to make these gravity defying pieces here, which the wings themselves are gravity defying, but like to go the extra mile and really commit to it is so interesting. As far as the clothes go, these are really interesting. Look at all of like these chunky jewelry pieces. It's so interesting. And this like ruffle off-shoulder collar, off-shoulder neckline I should say, mixed with the like ruffled off-shoulder sleeves with like the cutout in between, and then how it matches the bracelets. So interesting. Fake tattoos for extra playfulness. So interesting. And this pattern is really subtle with the hibiscus flowers, and so is the striping. All these are really subtle patterns, and you see them on each ruffle piece too. And thanks to their subtlety, you don't get distracted by them. They just add extra visual interest. Perfect. Oh, and this is like a star bracelet. Very cool. You get a small hint of logo on like the waist here. Extra chunky plastic chains. Very youthful, and a water gun stuck on. So fun. All of these different pattern pieces, which it all keeps to a cohesive color scheme, so nothing's really like jumping out at you. It's just that the more you look at it, the more you can appreciate. Whereas I think a lot of the other designs, not a lot of them, but like the really complex designs, the more you look at them, the more lost you get, right? There's like nothing to look into. It's just kind of like a mishmash of things. But here, if you look more deeply into the design, you see like, oh, I noticed this pattern, and like, oh, I noticed like everything is recognizable and cohesive and coherent, especially. Oh, look how fun. They even have like an inner tube for the heel. That's so cool. I guess this shoe does present a good example of what I mean by like distracting and overwhelming detail, because the more you look at this shape created by this leg cuff, the less you understand. So like you understand there's like ruffles here, right? And there's like a second ruffle. And then you go up and you look and you're like, okay, that's a chain. But it's not really clear what the chain's attached to. And there's also all these other details coming off it. And then you start to kind of lose yourself in these like small details where it's like, what is that? Well, it's probably an inner tube, but like, what's it under? And like all this stuff just becomes less and less identifiable. That's what I mean about like the overwhelming detail, where it's like it just becomes unclear of what anything actually is. Other than that, I think the sandal shape is really cute. Yeah, and all together, everything's working pretty well. Yeah, the lug cuffs I think just create a little bit too much condensed detail, which like everything up here is a lot more spaced out and identifiable. It's still very detailed, but you can keep track of it all. I think it's okay to have that much volume. You just want to reduce the amount of visual noise you have down here, because everything here is so small and tight, and everything here is like big and loose that it creates a really strong distraction, I think. Yeah, especially when you have the asymmetry there, drawing more attention to it. It's almost like this thigh cuff is fine, and this like crisscross lacing is fine. And then yeah, that'd be where I see the problem is in those leg cuffs or the ankle cuffs. Oh, otherwise though, I think I've been really clear that I really do like this one, especially the top and the bottom, and the wings are great. Even though we only see, I think it's Elsa's, Yume's, Laura's, and Hime's in the anime, they kind of represent what I don't like as much about the later series' design philosophies, is when they go really hardcore extra like this, which there's nothing wrong if you like that aesthetic and you like the bigger shapes, but for me, I think it just becomes really fantastical in like a bad way. Because again, I said I like more grounded, realistic designs where you can kind of tell what everything is. And it's hard to do that with these designs. First of all, you have like the silhouette. I'm not really a big fan of this almost like cake topper design where you have really huge skirt and then like a tiny, tiny bodice. That doesn't really do it for me. I like a more streamlined silhouette usually, with a little bit more variation in what's going on, specific choices about which pieces are creating the silhouette interest, more structural value, I guess. There's just so many layers that you can see when they break it down into the 2D animated versions, that they struggle to define the details. Like they struggle to define like what the wings exactly are, besides just like a rainbow gradient. And they kind of disagree between different models of what exactly is happening with the wings. See how this one is just so much more drawn out, and then this one, it's a lot sharper. So that's not a good sign, for me at least. And there's also just the fact that this is kind of a plain fabric with not much going on. It's mostly relying on like the sparkle gradients and textures, which again is a perfectly fine style. It's just not what I usually look for in Aikatsu designs. I like something that has a little bit more recognizable structure and material to it. And yeah, you can see that too with the illustration here, which is like it's just not very clear, even from like their internal side with their animators. It's not really clear what all these layers are doing. There's just so much going on here, and it doesn't really have a recognizable hierarchy or anything that you can pick out to say like, okay, this is the most important thing. Like this is the most important piece because it has the most contrast. And then after that, everything is almost random in where it's placed. It has a very loose shape to it, which can work. It just then gets lost in like the randomness of the skirt, right? But yeah, all of these layers in the skirt, there's just so much gradient, so much color, so much texture. Like the main pieces are this top piece, and then I think it goes down to these like draped bits, and then you'd have like this panel here, but then it gets like infinitesimally smaller to the point where it like loses all order. Now it's not like it was a Floral Fantasia where that descended into like the organics of the flowers and the vines and everything. This is still like meant to be structured and graphic and iconic, and we see that with Hime's dress too. It's like a lot of vague sparkle texture, which is not an identifiable material. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like hating on fun here. But like at least Hime's is like a more monochromatic. It's just a simple white, so you can really focus on like the shapes that are being created and like these chains and beads. That's identifiable, but you can see how Yume's is a lot busier because of all the color variation. And like, yes, her theme is rainbows, but that means you have to balance how much color contrast you're bringing in, how much hue variation with the amount of detail that you have. But like even that doesn't save Hime's cord because I still think it looks just like structurally indistinguishable between all the layers. And it's even worse, I think, because at least Yume's has like this strong contrast in hues that it's using, but like Hime's is just everything just gets so lost because there's no visual hierarchy here. Not in hue or shape or visual flow or really anything. And then there's these, again, undefined sparkle crystal textures. There's where it's like really hard to figure out what is making that texture happen. Because then you also get you lose a lot of control over your color palette too when you have just these like almost randomly animating textures. They're just creating more visual noise for no clear purpose. I think you can do a really complex design like this, but you have to be really intentional about your focal points and what you're doing and what the purpose of it is, because for a piece that's meant to be like moving instead of just like an illustration, all of this can be really distracting. Let's see, an Elsa's I won't go into Laura's because I think I have the same point to say, but I just want to show you. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at all these mosaics. Like, and this like black line, the black line which doesn't go anywhere else, the black stays in the skirt. The black doesn't come up here, so where are you looking? If this is the highest contrast like band here, then where do you go? I don't think you can go anywhere. Look, 'cause I guess you go up to the top of the bodice, but let me see. It's not showing there. You can't see that most of the time because it's covered by her hair. So how are you getting from this to this? I guess you'd follow these up and then you'd immediately get lost in all this texture. And then you can follow this hand up, but that still doesn't connect into the bodice. That's not even, is it only black when like in that one section? I don't think I have anything else to add for like constructive comments, but just what's happening here? What's going on? I'm lost. I need help. Look at it's not really practical because like what are you going to do about like footwork for these designs? I know these aren't used in like most of the series, but like what are you going to do? If you're playing the game, are you just hiding most of the animation for what? Why? What are we doing here? Why is this just like a giant split between red and purple and black and yellow and pink? I'm a little shocked. And like you have so much like pattern and then these like jewelry sections which create so many little lines and so many little shapes. It's impossible to keep track of. I think those are supposed to be clouds. Are these supposed to be clouds on the bodice? The more I look, the more I have questions. Like, okay, purple, that almost looks pretty, and then what's that at the bottom? What is that? Why? It's already so fantastical just in concept to have your dress be half made out of feathers. But then to add, like, all of this? What is this? What is this? I do apologize if you really like these designs and I'm just being really negative about them. I think there is definitely room for people to like the more fantastical designs and the more exaggerated designs, and if you're sentimental about them, then obviously everything is all good. I do not judge anyone who has these as their favorite. It just means that they have a different taste than mine, which is always okay. I do have to say that these stars, I think, might be my breaking point. What are these? I can't stop looking at it and just seeing more things that don't make sense to me. What do we do? What do we do, everyone? What are we going to do about the stars? Where did they come from? What is this texture? Why is this rainbow? We don't know. We'll probably never know. Goodbye. Leave all your suggestions for Aikatsu Stars, friends, and planet topics in the comments section here. The comment with the most likes will be our next casual video topic, so make sure you go support the ideas you want to hear me talk about. Also, let me know what you thought of this format. I'm still getting used to unscripted commentary, but I hope you still enjoyed it. Bye bye!
Good job!